Thank you. Good morning and welcome everybody to the meeting of the Scrutiny Commission for today, the 5th of June 2025. We've started a meeting at 10 o'clock, so we'll get started right away with item 1, which is the minutes of the 6th of March 2025. Are members happy to agree the minutes of the meeting held on 6th of March? All in favour? Thank you very much. Sign the minutes. Apologies and substitutes. To receive any apologies, substitute members in attendance. Have we got any apologies, Ruth?
Thank you, Chairman. We've received apologies from Councillor Nunn, Councillor Eagle, Councillor Land, and we have Councillor Oliver here as substitute for Councillor Nunn. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I understand for information that we've received that Councillor Bowes is on the way and held up through traffic. I have no announcements as the chairman. I also have no notice of any urgent business. Are there any declarations under item 5 if members have any interest to declare? Thank you very much. And I note the names of any non-members of the Commission who may be here today, and thank you for your attendance today. We now come to item 7, which is a visit of our Police and Crime Commissioner for Norfolk, Sarah Taylor, who can talk about the wide-ranging issues about the role and priorities of the PCC in Norfolk. I think it's a huge role and one that interacts with all sorts of communities and other agencies, you know, not just what you might perceive if you knew nothing about the role at all. It's a huge, challenging role, and I know that Sarah is equal to the task, and we're very grateful to her for distributing the police and crime plan for 25 to 29. So I'd like to welcome Sarah Taylor to the meeting in her capacity as PCC, and to thank you, Sarah, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to attend today. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. It's very odd to be sat on this side of the room. Let me just say that. Look at everything, and actually, I do note it is warmer than sat on where I normally sit. So I've been asked to talk about the role of the PCC, the recent budget available to PCCs sort of in general, how those budget changes will affect Norfolk and Breckland in particular, current priorities and issues as I see them, and then how Breckland Council and members could assist. I just thought it might be worth just checking if there's anything else that, like, specifically people would like me to cover before I sort of launch into a monologue for 15 minutes, because then I can incorporate that. No. Okay. So one thing that I have found pretty much without exception is that the role of the PCC is not particularly well understood by most people, and I would include central government in that, not just members of the public. So I'm going to say, and the other thing I would say is that it is so clear within about 2 days of starting my term that every PCC executes their function really differently and quite uniquely. So I'll comment on the role how I see it, but I'm sure if you were to speak to colleagues, even Tim in Suffolk, he I know would have a very different interpretation in some areas than I do. So I just wanted to acknowledge that really. So the role of the Police and Crime Commissioner is often talked about in terms of being responsible for the totality of policing in an area. That's how the legislation kind of presents it. It's often communicated in terms of being, the job is relating to holding the Chief Constable to account. Often the press talks about the fact that the Police and Crime Commissioner has the power to sack the Chief Constable. It tends to be communicated to the public in those quite tough kind of ways. The main bit, though, that the way that I see it is that I'm elected. So that the fact that people have elected me to be their representative means that I place greater importance or greater prioritisation on making sure that I function meaningfully and consistently to bring the voice of all of our communities, both geographically and then demographically, into policing. And by policing, I don't just mean into the constabulary, I mean into the totality of it. So as it relates to the criminal justice system, as it relates to partnership working, as it relates to local, regional, and then national considerations as well. So for those reasons, the way that the Police and Crime Commissioner role can actually be done in practice is almost, well, it is one of those jobs which could be infinite work. If you wanted it to be, it could fill up your entire day, every day, doing different things. I would like to, for the interests of both effectiveness and sanity, I've tried to be very clear on developing my own priorities, which are led by and informed by what people tell me, basically. And those people are members of the public who stop me in Tesco, which is a slightly less frequent occurrence than it used to be, members of the constabulary themselves, local members like yourselves, anyone and everyone, it all goes in. And I also get a lot of correspondence, direct correspondence, which I take into account as well. So the role of the PCC away from that incorporates a very long list of statutory duties, and they range from oversight or the appeal of complaints regarding the police, through to having convening powers and partnership working, through to not a line management function, but as I say, that sort of governance function within the police. I am the owner of the estate. I act legally as corporation sole, so I am in effect the landlord for the police. And then, as the word commissioner would suggest within my job title, I also am responsible for the budget setting, obviously in an informed and taking substantial advice from my CFO and others, but then commissioning services to both support victims of crime through different Ministry of Justice funds and prevent crime from happening in the first place. So it is a wide-ranging role, and the role has changed almost every other year within the legislation that's been put down by various governments. So it is a constantly evolving role. So I think everyone can be forgiven for not knowing the absolute sort of ins and outs of it, really. So I just wanted to hopefully everyone has got one of these. I have got loads here, so I just thought I'm happy to leave some so everyone can have them. In case you missed it or haven't realised what this is, because I know we all get inundated with lots of different policies and glossy documents. So one of my, I think it's 62 statutory duties is to produce a police and crime plan. And so this is the one that was issued earlier this year in the spring, which basically puts together all of the different reflections and priorities for Norfolk to the period of 2029. And so this went through the Police and Crime Panel. So for those of you who are not aware, the Police and Crime Panel convenes periodically. It's comprised of local members from across all the districts and county. Councillor Ashby is the representative for Breckland on the panel. So the panel have sight of all of these and sort of all of the product basically that's associated with the Police and Crime Plan work and precept setting and all of that kind of sort of body of work, and provide some scrutiny of it and reflections of it prior to it being published. So the Police and Crime Plan was developed following probably the most extensive and certainly the most representative period of public consultation that any PCC has done to date within Norfolk. As with anything though, it's always really challenging to get people to put their thoughts onto a survey, which is why I did a huge number of pop-up kind of surgeries and consultation events in person across the county. And it was really a matter of collecting all of that information together, both quantitative and qualitative, which has gone into informing the 3 priorities that are set out in the plan. So I thought bringing this in today, obviously it's a published document, but in case you weren't aware of it, that's here. So the 3 priorities, which have been articulated really, really clearly by members of the public, are to prevent crime, cohesive communities, and reducing harm. And I know the way that I talk about it can raise a few eyebrows, but I think that's my job, is to just say it as I see it. And the general, a really strong theme that came across in the conversations that I had and in the correspondence, and that continue to come into my inbox, I would categorise broadly as a sense of the system being broken in some way. So I don't mean comprehensively and in every aspect. It's just that people really, really notice and they really feel that something isn't working for them, and they feel like it should, that they don't think that their expectations are unreasonable. So that has been a little bit of a lodestar in terms of trying to organise my thoughts around how to then prioritise work going forward. I don't want to come across as being messianic in approach. That is not the intent, but it's more like that is the guiding sort of principle. So everything that I can do, can it in some way add some resilience, improve a public service? Can it make people's experience of that thing be in some way improved? And in the light of budget cuts, my thinking is, even if I can only turn the dial 1/4 of a percentage point, then I will take it, because it's still going to improve the experience for some people. As you might expect, because my remit covers the whole of Norfolk, I don't break the police and crime plan down into different districts, different areas, but it's the general sort of principles. And then within this, you'll see that within each objective, there's some commitments, and these relate to basically a series of projects. So the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner has largely focused on commissioning, and I, largely because of my professional background, have thrown down the gauntlet in terms of looking at both commissioning and also delivering projects. So those projects are quite wide ranging, but you'll see in terms of, I believe it's in cohesive communities, for example, there's a project around strengthening community networks. That's on this page, but just to help bring that to life a little bit, there's a commitment that I will strengthen community networks, and the project that is in that is around administrative support will be increased for the Revitalised Neighbourhood Watch programme, helping communities work together to prevent crime across Norfolk. So that project is on like a programme of work which is in the public domain, that goes through Police and Crime Panel. I report on that every quarter to the Police and Crime Panel. And so if you wanted, if there were particular projects that you or your local residents feel are important in your area, then if you wish to, you can look at the progress within that tracker sort of going forward. It's in the public domain. So, and just on that one, I can confirm that that's already underway. That administration has been provided to strengthen the Neighbourhood Watch, and that is moving forward. So hopefully that's helpful in terms of setting the scene around the role, and then how this document relates to the work that I do, the commissioning decisions and the grants that are awarded through that office. That then brings me to the budgets, which is not a surprise to anyone, really, in terms of the budgets being reduced year on year. That's something I know everyone in this room has unfortunate experience of. There are, however, different aspects to that. So you'll be aware that the employer's national insurance increases have reduced in the real terms, in effect, have reduced the overall budget available. And the commissioning funding settlements that have been awarded have not been increased year on year either. So as is the case for a lot of our public services, we're effectively looking to do at least the same with less. And often we're looking to try to achieve more with less. In terms of the constabulary, they have had a reduction in funding as a result of those employers' NIs. Because of the way that funding is awarded to constabularies through that funding formula, about a third of constabularies in the country, which broadly tend to be the rural ones, tend to not be awarded sufficient funding just to cover headcount. You're experiencing what it's like to sit over there now with thinking of it. It's a quick diversion. So unfortunately, Norfolk Constabulary did not, for example, receive enough funding to cover the increase in employers' NIs, which meant that we've had to divert budget from elsewhere. Again, that is not uncommon, and over the last 14 years, that has not been an uncommon story, but just to be clear, that still persists. And obviously, I'm just going to say, looking forward to the CSI on the 11th to see what comes out of that. So at the moment, just right now, today, there is quite a bit of uncertainty just because we haven't yet had that comprehensive spending review. In terms of how it affects Norfolk and Breckland in particular, you might be aware of the constabulary's core values, which really seek to put public service and the real fundamentals of investigating crime at the heart, which on the one hand sounds as though that should be the case for everyone, but as you might imagine, because of different priorities and political winds that blow, often constabularies don't necessarily put that at the heart of what they do. And I think we see real effective policing in Norfolk. We tend to be at the top of the national lists in a huge number of metrics, which is really, really welcome. Anything from the shoplifting rates through to the numbers of collapsed cases due to evidence they're really delivering a good service. That said, it is not perfect, and the Chief Constable and I talk really frequently around matters, both very, very specific detailed matters that might be raised by members of the public, and those conversations are part of that accountability process. When I create letters which pick up on various themes that people might have mentioned to me over a period of time, I will send that in where there's a collection of different issues around a theme and ask the Chief Constable to look at that particularly. So I've done that specifically around firearms licensing, which I know has been a real issue for a lot of our residents, and I know that that's a real issue for a lot of residents in Breckland. The backlog nationally is eye-watering. In Norfolk, the backlog is still pretty chunky, but it's nowhere near where it is in others, and I'm pleased to say that there are additional resources going into that, which should change things. I've also had, my most recent letter to the Chief Constable has been around a broad theme of wildlife crime and animal welfare in terms of their investigations. So this runs from anything from the investigation of wildlife crime as nesting season approached through to dealing with XL bullies and making sure that welfare is at the heart of everything that they do, even in the face of having destruction orders. So far, I'm not seeing the public service in terms of the high risk, high harm incidents change in terms of people's experience of policing in Norfolk. Necessarily though, because resourcing of course has to reflect that change in funding, we do see that what I would generally term the kind of the small frustrations, the things that are the glue that hold things together, we do see that change. And I think this is why we have led to a position where people feel that the system isn't quite working as it should. So a really, really good example of that, which I'm sure everyone has experience of, is speeding through our local villages, which is that alone would constitute an enormous chunk of the correspondence that I receive, where people just do not feel that enforcement is a priority. They don't feel that the highway authority is doing what it should. They don't necessarily know the specific part that each part of the system has to play in dealing with speeding through rural villages, but they just have a sense that it isn't quite working. And the other one, again, it's a highways matter, is pavement parking, which I know in our own local SNAP meetings is a recurring theme, and we are not unusual in that respect. So here in Dereham, the SNAP meetings are often have that issue reported in, and again, that's a common theme across the county. And whilst a lot of that relies on national government position around the legal position of pavement parking, there is just that sense of the low level but high incidence rate stuff of life just isn't getting dealt with. So I do also hold the constabulary to account on that part, and also look to work collaboratively with them and with other partners to see how we can improve that situation. In terms then of the current priorities, so I've obviously touched on a few of them. The kind of broad themes are that of preventing crime, cohesive communities and reducing harm, as I set out earlier, and there's a bit more information in there. In terms of the correspondence, the stuff that I see every single day when I'm in the office, it does really focus in on road safety, neighbourhood policing, and then the safety or the attractiveness of sense of safety within our high streets, and then shoplifting is adjacent to that. And on the one hand, you might reasonably expect that to be the majority sort of correspondence that comes in, because actually that's where most people's experience of the police meets. I would be really, really concerned if most of my correspondence related to sexual offences or homicide and that kind of thing. So I think my sense is that this is an indication that all of the rest of the non-visible bit of policing, which is the majority of policing, is being conducted well. You know, I have conversations with victims and survivors of those crimes. I do get some correspondence in which tends to be very reflective. And then, as I say, I hold the Chief Constable to account in those matters as well. Through the formal accountability processes. In terms, though, of road safety, neighbourhood policing and the high streets, I can just give you a quick sort of update on those three. So starting with road safety, you might be aware of the Road Safety Partnership, which exists largely. The operational aspect and the camera partnership has been functioning for a while. The Road Safety Partnership Strategic Board should really be the place at which those key decisions around prioritisation are made, and that had not met for 4 years. So I'm pleased that that has now been convened. I was going to chair that, but I will get onto this properly at the end of this. Devolution has made me just take my foot off that particular pedal. I'm a definite and very active participant in it, but I wanted there to be continuity. So once we've got clarity on that, then we'll be able to make a better decision. So that Road Safety Partnership Strategic Board met for the first time just a couple of months ago, and that will move forward. I was really pleased to be able to take some members of that board over to Warwickshire, where the PCC there leads their strategic board, and they're about 4 years ahead of where Norfolk is in terms of taking a preventative approach to road safety through that strategic partnership and through that board in particular. So I was really glad that members of the constabulary and Norfolk Highways team were able to come with me to that meeting, and we've already had some really good, really fruitful and productive discussions as a result of that. And we're looking forward to Warwickshire colleagues coming over to Norfolk to talk with us about data sharing and some of the infrastructure that can underpin that as well. So that is a slow moving process, not least because there's so many different partners involved, but I'm glad that it is moving forward. On neighbourhood policing, you may well be aware of the neighbourhood policing guarantee that was announced by the Home Office and the additional funding to achieve the 13,000 new officers within the national neighbourhoods, and also the guarantee of a named officer in every community. I was really pleased that when this was announced, the vast majority of Norfolk already had basically a named officer through the beat managers. There is obviously a little bit of adjustment needed to that because the requirements from the Home Office differ from the principle that was being used here. But that is, that's in effect just some housekeeping on the approach rather than a wholesale change, which is great. And I think that that named officer for each community will help areas which have unfortunately been affected just by having one officer go off sick, followed unfortunately in some instances by another officer going off sick. It will give them better certainty of how those kind of functions are backfilled. Within the neighbourhood policing guarantee, though, we have secured additional funding through that. I know that was a hard decision for some constabularies. It was a very easy decision for ours because we want more officers, and that the need or the desire for that to have a greater visible policing on our high streets is very well communicated by people living here. So there will inevitably and hopefully obviously be a delay before those officers are on our streets because they have to go through training. But the first cohort has landed and they will be trained and they will start to hit Norfolk streets soon. I should just say though that in terms of Norfolk, that total comes to 31 additional officers. So of the 13,000, because we've got quite a small constabulary, the number is relatively small at this stage, but hopefully it will grow. We'll see how the funding settlement continues going forward. And then lastly, on the high streets and shoplifting point, the Home Office has provided basically a guarantee around keeping the town centre safe during the summer, and this is to deal with antisocial behaviour across the country. And Norfolk Constabulary and my own office are actively participating in developing that programme. That has to be submitted tomorrow, so I'm having another meeting with businesses later on this afternoon to talk with them about how they might be able to see some change within their town centres and also potentially participators as well. If you're not aware, dealing with antisocial behaviour is definitely a partnership course of action, and the partnerships within Norfolk are really, really mature. There's a huge amount of work that happens across that partnership space, not least with environmental protection officers, housing officers, other officers here in Breckland, as was even reported in yesterday's licensing committee. That work is, as I say, it's really mature. It's been ongoing for a long time here in Norfolk. So that programme of work to support the Keeping Town Centres Safe this summer programme has been relatively easy. The challenge then, which we're all grappling with, is how do we get even more out of that? So that's going to be an interesting piece of work. And then alongside that, the close cousin is around shoplifting. Just to remind you, this is around my own priorities because these touch on the correspondence that I've had in. And I do get quite a lot of shoplifting, quite a lot of correspondence regarding shoplifting, largely because Norfolk Constabulary has the best results with respect to investigating shoplifting in the country. So they've had a lot of press on it, which then elicits a lot of correspondence. And that is helpful because it's identified some real gaps within some of our retailers. Some retailers just not providing CCTV footage, for example. So we're in a sort of slightly strange situation whereby the police are doing really good work. That's demonstrable. We can see that that is happening. Some people are concerned legitimately that not enough is being done, and my observation would be that in some places that's because we're not able to get the CCTV from some of our retailers into the constabulary. So what I will be doing later on this summer is basically looking to talk with retailers around expediting that so that the good work that the constabulary is doing can be spread across more of the county more consistently. Still recovering from a cold. Sorry. Right, so they're the current priorities. As I see it, sorry, recovering. I just was going to, as I said, I will just touch on devolution. because this is probably the single biggest issue that certainly that I am facing, but that the county is facing, and that is because of the inherent uncertainty within that. So, and I'm just going to, for the purposes of this, I'll talk about just briefly the local government review and devolution, because these are two issues which do have consequential effects with respect to, or the potential for consequential effects with respect to, both policing and the partnership working that happens within that space. So firstly, on devolution, you may not be aware, you may be aware that the proposal currently that is set out in the or that was set out, excuse me, in the consultation for devolution used the East Midlands approach. The East Midlands mayoralty has separate PCCs, but the proposal here is that the PCC function is incorporated. I'm going to have to cough again, sorry. Sorry, so grim. So as is set out within that model, there is some incompatibility there, which I have written to the Minister about just to make him aware. But basically, if I put it this is really massively simplifying it, but basically there's a question around whether, someone else might have to talk in a minute, sorry, I'm going to have to cough. Thinking it's only 5 years ago, I would not come here with this. It's weird, isn't it, thinking about that? Right, sorry.
Do we want to take a little pause there?
Oh no, I want to get this done. Right. So, but I appreciate the offer. I'm going to try and power through. So the model as it's currently set out, which frankly is all I have to go on because that's the only thing that's in the public domain, basically raises, or has inherent to it, a question as to whether the PCC function, and it may or may not include fire, obviously we don't know yet, whether that be incorporated into the mayoralty function from day one or not. Now, some PCCs have a very strong view on this. I am somewhat more agnostic, but I don't love the uncertainty. Their view is that if you have an electoral mandate, then that mandate should stand and you should have the whole of your term in order to fulfil that mandate. At the moment, my understanding is that the question of whether or not that function is incorporated from day one would obviously need to be laid down in legislation. That's not yet been decided upon. So as I see it, there are 3 possible alternatives, maybe 4, and I think it's just worth saying out loud so that everyone has some sight over the inherent uncertainty that I'm currently operating in, because that affects decisions. So the first option is that my term is foreshortened and it ends in May next year. I have written to the Minister saying that I feel quite strongly that to ensure continuity of service, the office of the PCC function should be retained separately to the CCA that's proposed. That happens now in other areas. That is a model that already exists. So that's not a novel concept, but I've reinforced the point that I feel that that is required to really ensure that continuity of service. And I've also said that I really feel strongly there should be a transition period, because the mayoral function has the potential to be very substantial. As I say, the PCC function has potential to be very substantial. So regardless of when that happens, there should be an ability to have that transition if it happens before 2028. If we take in mind that there may be a transition, it then brings into being the idea that the term could be foreshortened, but after May 26. So say, for example, May 27, when you've got the local elections for the unitaries, or of course it could run to term. If no new legislation is laid down, because you all know those parliamentary windows have a habit of vanishing, then and the PCC function is not incorporated in 26, then my understanding is that the PCC function could then be incorporated in 2030, which I know other local members have had their terms extended because of the local government review. Who knows? So I just wanted to be clear that there is really, really substantial uncertainty within my ability to make funding decisions that extend beyond May. I have been pressing for a decision and clarity on that point. I think it's really important everyone has sight of that so that we can make decisions in an informed way. But as yet, no news. So on that note, I think I'll end there. Have a really good cough, have a drink, and then I'll be able to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for that, Sarah, and really bringing the role to life, talking about issues that affect not just the county, but us here in Breckland. And I'm sure those of us who've been to SNAP meetings, parish meetings, town meetings, things that affect us in the town, things that affect us in rural areas, the challenges and opportunities you've got on the job, the whole range of partnership working, and thank you again for the police and crime plan, which I'm sure if members haven't delved into it already, I'm sure some of you have, I recommend you do, and also looking ahead to the future, and that's helpful because we also had a debate here about devolution at Scrutiny, so it's helpful to have that future forecasting and a sort of, reality check in that sort of corridor of uncertainty. Thank you very much. I'm now going to throw this open to members first for questioning. Just ask people to bear in mind not just brevity of questions, but also the time we hope to finish by 11. And obviously, possibly preempting our commissioner, is that if you'll see the back page of the booklet, there's details of how to actually get in touch on the very back page of how to get in touch with the PCC in that role. So that's very helpful. I think the first hand I've seen up is Councillor Oliver. Rodri.
Thank you, Chairman. Two questions from me, if I may. One related. One is, so obviously you're here today talking to Breckland. The current proposals around devolution and local government reform might mean that this council ceases to exist. We like this council, we think it does a good job. What is your view more widely about the devolution proposals, how it's going to change the face of local government around here, and whether you think that's going to be beneficial from a PCC perspective? And the supplementary is, in the event that Norfolk and Suffolk do undergo all of this work, and I say if because I've seen devolution come and go so many times before, who knows what will happen ultimately, is there a case for combining a Norfolk and Suffolk police force to make a single entity under the same sort of size jurisdiction as devolution is proposing?
Sorry?
Few questions. We have 3 questions.
Yes.
And then it will allow.
Yeah. Give Sarah some time to have a drink. Could we have just 2 more questions? Councillor Wickerson and Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Wickerson.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Sarah, good morning. It's the simple questions, which maybe the answer might come through an email if necessary. I'm interested in this Road Safety Partnership Strategic Board and the makeup of that in terms of how members of the public or members of this council could actually access that if need be, if we're talking about strategics. I'm very pleased to see, by the way, under your priorities cohesive communities page, there's a photograph of Swaffham. Very good example. Thank you. Appreciate that. And the other question is quite simple. This obviously needs a bit of reading through. But what is the circulation of this? Has it been circulated to town parishes, town councils, for example? Because I think it contains a lot of very valuable information, and circulation of that, I think, should be beyond the district council into the town, at least the 5 towns that we have in Breckland.
Peter?
Oh, sorry, thank you.
Morning, Sarah, and thank you for attending today. You're probably going to be aware of the question I'm asking, but I'd like to put this out into the public domain, really, that it's important. A lot of people don't probably think about it. Breckland Council, for the last few years, has helped fund automatic number plates, to help fund the PCC's office with automatic number plate recognition cameras, ANPR. This was to help the PCC's office combat county line drug gangs that come into Norfolk from cities across the country, recruiting young people in our towns across Norfolk. Intelligence now shows that these gangs are now coming into Thetford and Attleborough in particular by train and avoiding the ANPR road cameras. Breckland Council recently funded a project to make young people aware of dangers and recruitment these methods these gangs use. This project was produced by the Thetford production company Magic Floor. The production company put together last year in Thetford and delivered an emotional, powerful message through music and action, showing the devastating effects these county line gangs have on families. In some cases, young people and their families are being destroyed. Working with Breckland Community Enabling Officers here in Elizabeth House, we asked you to fund further education productions. Unfortunately, after several positive emails with your office, in the end, the answer was no funding. I feel it is very important to get this message across, and we would have delivered it to all boroughs and districts across Norfolk. This method of communication resonates with young people compared to having a one-off ad hoc lecture. Can I ask why protecting young people and their families from these gangs is not a priority? And after all, young people are our future.
Thank you. I appreciate the chance to be able to get my voice back, but let's see what happens. So, devolution, beneficial or not with respect to the PCC function. The reason why I'm relatively agnostic about it is because we already have a model that's in place that does function pretty well, as far as I can see, with respect to the use of deputy mayors. So certainly the deputy mayors that I speak with across not just the really large metropolitan areas do seem to have a really good, they carry out the function in the same way because it is the PCC function. So I think in terms of the way that bit of the governance is carried out, assuming the model doesn't change, which, as I said earlier, it evolves sort of every other year, as things currently stand, I think it's going to be like a neutral act in effect. So it's just that it will just be executed by a different person, basically. In terms of the question around the potential for combining forces, I have made the observation that it's pretty obvious that there is a need to look at the number of forces because there's a certain appetite for that at a national level and within different sort of regions. I think we have a very large number. There's a reason that people are looking to centralise things like procurement and that kind of thing. That's something that the Norfolk Constabulary has done for a long time. There would, because there's already a very substantial shared space in between Norfolk and Suffolk constabularies, there's to a large extent that is happening already, but from a governance position, obviously it's not. Again, I am relatively agnostic about whether or not that happens. My understanding is there's no particular appetite within the national government to progress anything of that nature at this point, but it's really not my call to make. So. But as I say, I think with respect to Norfolk and Suffolk in particular, if, and it is a really substantial if, because there's nothing at all to indicate that this is going to happen. If it did happen, I can see that because they've already got this very mature sort of partnership arrangement anyway, it's not actually a partnership, it's a fully shared sort of space. The level of disruption, I think, would be somewhat minimal, which is helpful. Hopefully that answers your questions. Great. So then, David, in terms of the strategic board for the Road Safety Partnership, It is so the strategic partnership, the strategic board, excuse me, itself is closed, but it's made up of officers basically through those elected areas. So there's governance and oversight of it. There should, though, be, or there will be, once the full sort of governance and structure of that safety partnership has been set up, there absolutely will be very clear communication channels in between the areas where local members are more actively participating in working groups and that kind of thing, back up to that strategic board. So, and in that respect, it's not that dissimilar from how other boards operate already with that sort of governance and kind of oversight point. I know that the Community Safety Partnership Scrutiny panel had the Road Safety Partnership in sort of very recently, just in the last couple of months. So there is already a mechanism there for it. I know it's not directly what you asked about in terms of like the active participation of members of the public, but there would be that route in. And I'm sorry that that's still a future tense issue, but that's just where we are in terms of sort of setting it up. In terms of your question around the police and crime plan circulation to parish councils, the short answer is that I don't know for sure. My understanding is that it was distributed through NALC, but I will happily go and double check that. So through that route then into parish and town councils, but I will, you know, happily go and ask the question, and if for some reason it hasn't, I will ask them to do so. But you'll understand that's a administrative point, but I'm very happy to go and look that up. So the question around the Thetford Production Company, yep, you're right, there was no funding. There's the reason for that is because in Breckland in particular, the leader of the council had asked me about funding additional street wardens, not just in Thetford, but to extend that proposal out of Thetford and into other areas. And we know that that's something I'm really keen to do, not least because of the visit to Thetford, which was just great, actually seeing how they work, seeing their engagement with some really young people. I always remember the engagement that Jayden had with the kids on the bikes, you know, sort of bombing up and down the high street. We know that that works. I'm really keen to find a way of doing that. So the money that I've ring-fenced is to go into that if we can get that funding pot organised. So it is, I will take issue with your assertion that young people's safety is not a priority, because it absolutely substantively is. It's just that, and particularly given my very first paid job was in theatre, I would have loved to have found £5 grand to be able to put at this, but it just wasn't there. And very sadly, that is just all too often the case. It's been, I have though, I should just say, I found that I find it really frustrating to say this. So I spent a bit of time, because I remember your emails landed as I was still trying to find money, basically, like trying to find change down the back of the sofa to fund smaller things like this, rather than the 1.5 million that's put into NIDAS, you know, those big county-wide sort of propositions. And I did find some money. So there's a thing called the Police Property Fund Act, which is basically made up of, this sounds like selling woolly jumpers off eBay, but it isn't that. It's basically the funds that are secured by the constabulary selling very, very old lost property and that kind of thing. That Police Property Fund Act allows the Police and Crime Commissioner and the Chief Constable to make decisions about how that is spent. Has to go only through charitable purposes, which is, I think, if I recall correctly, and I may well not be, so please correct me if I'm wrong, I think that I had looked at whether we might use that for the theatre production, but because it was going through Breckland, we couldn't do that because the PPFA has to be used for a charitable object, basically, and it just didn't fulfil that singular criteria under the regulations. But the Police Property Fund Act has not been spent. That has been languishing in a ring-fenced kind of bucket for years, and it's not huge, but it's £350,000 of money that has not been spent. So, I mean, compared to, you know, the few millions of pounds a year that I have to spend on servicing, it is, as I say, it's relatively small change, but it still has a substantial potential impact if it were only spent. So basically, I'm spending that money that my predecessors have accrued. The other sort of fund that has been accrued is what has been termed a commissioning reserve. And this one I do find a bit problematic because that's taxpayers' money, which has been just sat in a reserve. And to my mind, if you've got taxpayers' money that is being put forward for commissioning, then it should be used for commissioning. So my team have been working up some proposals around how parts of that commissioning reserve, it was topping out at about 700,000. So it's, you know, it's not insignificant. So I've been looking at both of those aspects. There are obviously limitations on how I can spend both of those, but spend it I will. Devolution, not going to lie, it's really focusing my mind. So I want to make those decisions quickly so that we can make sure that it's being spent, but I want it to be spent effectively. And I've asked that they look specifically on the commissioning at both what sort of thing could be put in place to tackle issues from a prevention first point of view, and in particular looking at primary prevention, so not just dealing with ex-offenders, for example, and stopping them reoffending, but actually trying to bring that cohesion into communities to stop people or to divert people away from taking that first step towards offending in the first place. Because the reason for doing that is because, as so often, funding has been increasingly sent to areas of greatest need. Therefore, it means that the overwhelming majority of the areas, which by definition do not have greatest need, do not then have their own needs being met. So I'm trying to look at how we can get maximum value for money out of that funding pot. So yeah, it was a source of considerable frustration on both sides, I think, but it was an unfortunate coincidence of both the timing of it, because I hadn't had a chance to go and find some money, and then the limitations on that funding arrangement, which was, yeah, it was just disappointing, but that seems to happen quite often, unfortunately.
Thank you very much. We've got time, members, for a series of, if we have perhaps 3 questions and then time for Sarah to respond. For any members who have arrived after we've started, we're changing the order slightly so that the next presentation will be from Councillor Webb, who has to leave us by 11:30, so hope members take note of that. If we can have questions in threes. First one from Councillor Turner, then Councillor Bambridge, and then Councillor Bowes. And after that, if we've got time, Councillor Kyburn. Sorry, Robert. Thank you. Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a very quick one. Just as a piece of information, a lot of parishes don't belong to NALC now, so we wouldn't have had that leaflet. So if you could follow that up, that would be great. My question is, if I was a member of the public and I bumped into you in Tesco, in 2 sentences, the first one, what is the most effective thing you've done for me in the last year? And what is going to be the most effective thing you've done for me in the coming year as a member of the public?
Thank you. Gordon.
Thank you. Well, since you started your talk, I've written down about 20 questions. So I hope you come back, and I hope when you come back you bring a service officer as well who could ask questions that might rise on that size. And you've completely shot my main question out of the ground, and I'll write to you about that separately. But you seemed low in your priority on rural areas, I have to say, in your talk. It didn't come in your, as it were, starred or numbered presentation. Social media in my ward, and I suspect wider than that, shows a greatly increased activity of, I'll call them suspicious characters hanging around villages day and night and so on. So hence, the people in my communities feel that there should be a visible presence Now, last year at the Norfolk Show, the Chief Constable told me he'd got this sort of stopping system with cars passing through. If they pass through an area, they were to stop, get out and walk. That seems to have disappeared. Is that something you could influence a revival of?
Thank you. Next question, Claire Bowes. Thank you.
Thank you, and apologies for being late. Yeah, you have touched on one of my questions, which was around the success of the Safer Street Wardens in Thetford. Could you confirm that you will, or your office will be actively encouraging the other town councils in Breckland to work with the council and your office to match fund and roll out those wardens across all of our market towns in the future? And could I just ask what your office is doing to improve road safety outside schools, specifically to effectively tackle obstructive parking on pavements and junctions and parking across residents' driveways and the ASB that those acts can generate? Thank you.
Okay, so most effective thing I did last year, I think this is going to sound so Teflon, but I think it's just the practical reality, is I think it really depends on who you are, where you live, what your experience is, whether you're a victim of crime or not. One of the things that I've managed to do, which took a really long time to do, is decouple the Criminal Justice Board. So the Criminal Justice Board is one of the convening powers that PCCs have, and it has been a joint board between Norfolk and Suffolk for some years now, and as a result it is monolithic. It's absolutely huge, and therefore it's not very action orientated. And these boards are relied upon by Ministry of Justice to stand up and deal with issues through things like early prisoner release. They've been relied on by previous governments and they're relied on by this one. So one thing that I wanted to do very early on was decouple the boards, so that we've got a Norfolk one and a Suffolk one, and that it can be focused on risk and it can be focused on actually affecting change and improvements within that criminal justice system. If you're a victim of crime, unfortunately, the cold reality is that the impacts on you as a result of the Crown Court delays, as a result of CPS decisions around case quality, really, really impact not just you in terms of the timeliness of your court case coming forward, but also your experience with the police, because it tends to be the police that have to deliver that news to victims and that have to support the victims through that experience. So I have been, just as a direct result of listening to people who are victims of crime and who have survived crimes, I have been really prioritising that, because I can see that there is a huge appetite within different partners within the criminal justice system to make change, but the mechanism for doing that has not been effective. So I would like to think that if you could ask me in a year's time, there'd be much more like substantial, concrete things. But rightly or wrongly, I'm trying to focus on those structural things like the Road Safety Partnership Strategic Board, like the Criminal Justice Board, which can then affect quicker, more direct change as they get into better shape. So I think I've answered both your last year and this year question. Hopefully that's helpful. Rural areas, right, so it's definitely in there, having been brought up in a rural area in a completely isolated location. This is a massive issue for me, and I think the issue for me is manifold. I've talked about it during the political campaign, and I continue to talk about it, is that on the one hand, people who live in rural areas, experience of policing, like the blue lights response is part of that, but actually there's a bigger issue at play, which is around how are our services for victims, are they effective in our rural areas as they are in our urban? I don't think they are, because of things like transport, lack of bus service provision. You know, if you want to get from here to the DAISY programme in Watton, well then that's a bit of a challenge. It's even more of a challenge if you need to get there from Swaffham. So, you know, those kind of issues, and those kind of issues are in the gift of the PCC to try and move forward through the partnership work that happens, which is why, again, back to Councillor Turner's point, I'm trying to deal on those structural issues to affect change on the ground. It's a slow, drawn-out process. the cars stopping and walking, I know that in a lot of ways that's quite a nice idea, but I'm not convinced that it's very effective, because they're going to stop outside the co-op. This is like the cynical view. They're going to stop outside the local shop, pop in for a, you know, Fanta, and then be on their way again, because they're people, you know. And it would be better and more effective if the policing was deployment based and risk based. There are other ways and means of getting good policing responses into all of our communities, and my reflection on the priority setting meetings is that they're highly variable across the county. Some areas have them, like Dereham, we have them, it tends to be the same people that are there. In Thetford, there will commonly be sort of 30, 40 people in those SNAP meetings. Other areas don't have SNAP meetings at all. It's really varied. So one thing that I've commissioned is a piece of work to actually start to allow anyone to get their voice into those local area priority setting discussions and decisions by the constabulary, because people can't necessarily turn up once a quarter to a SNAP meeting, but it's really important that the police understand their point of view and can act on it. So, and that will allow for far more and far better engagement with our rural communities than can happen at present. So again, I know that that's a little bit vague, but that's because I've seen it emerging, I can see it happening. I'd like to think that that will be launched in its first iteration by sort of end of August. Hopefully I've not put too much pressure on the team delivering that, but that will allow for better communication into the constabulary for all of our communities. Does that, I can see you wanting to...
That doesn't answer really, because I asked you specifically about rural. The only communities you mentioned were what we would call in Breckland urban, the towns, Watton, Swaffham, Dereham. You didn't consider the villages. Most of the villages I represent don't have a co-op or even a shop. And when the stop was being instituted by the police, they generally walked around the villages when they stopped in those villages. I know we're limited for time, Chairman, and I'm happy to take it up outside of this meeting.
Okay, so those, I think there's a, you know, if we're talking about the tiny hamlets, the places where I grew up with 4 houses and nothing else, then the challenge is to get a meaningful police presence. My feeling, and this is where the PCC function is always going to be difficult, because your corporation soul, you're having to take into account what people say, but then ultimately you're also led by your own thoughts on something. I would rather an officer presence, when we have so few officers over an enormous county, I would rather their presence be meaningful and substantive, rather than them getting out and walking and sort of looking at what they bump into. I might be misinterpreting what you're saying, but that's the impression that I'm getting, is that. And I think the Chief Constable, the way that the beat managers are organised, the way that their priorities are set, you know, I'm referring to our market towns, but actually the rurality of our market towns and the villages that they serve is, to your point, you know, people would want to be able to go into their local town and then access services there, rather than have to head across the county to access something using 3 buses. Generally, that's what people are telling me, but I'm open to other voices on that always. In terms of your comment around officer presence, the way I see it, I'm here to be scrutinised, not my office. If you want an officer to come here and be asked questions, then please just let me know in future. I'm happy to arrange that. In terms of so my office, what my office is doing to deal with parking, I think I touched on at the very beginning, so sorry for just, yeah, so I think we might have sort of missed each other in that respect, yeah. So the issue of parking, just to quickly recap, is a huge amount of correspondence that I get, and it's a really tricky one to solve, not least because a lot of the issue is one for national government to take a position on, regarding whether or not it's an illegal, whether it's a criminal matter to park on a pavement. And the question of whether or not something constitutes an obstruction to the highway is a really, really tricky one. Now, there is partnership working within this space. I know Norfolk Highways do quite a lot of work with schools and around schools to try and engineer out some of those issues. Obviously, they've got issues with funding as well. I was communicating with a parish council not in Breckland around this very issue, and they could get it solved for the want of £7,500 to install some bollards, but they could not find £7,500. So it's an issue like just everywhere. My hope, and I don't think it's naive, but I think it's a direction of travel, is that by convening that Road Safety Partnership Strategic Board, by looking at the issues that come in to our inboxes across the partners, of which this is a really, really big one, and then making decisions around enforcement, deployment, around engineering measures that are put in, which are informed by that correspondence and by risk, you know, by the actual risk, which of course is higher if you've got small children walking in a 40-mile-an-hour limit with cars parked everywhere, limiting sight lines, you know, then I would like to think that that will change the way that those are prioritised and worked on. But I appreciate that doesn't give you an answer like right now, but that is where we are, unfortunately.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm going to take one final quick question from Councillor Kybird. Thank you very much, Robert.
Thank you, Chairman. My question is about public space protection orders and what is the PCC's role in establishing that. I have a constituent who suggests that the whole of Thetford Forest, which is subject to various illegal activity, could be designated a PSPO. Understand that whole forests have been so designated elsewhere in the country.
So the PCC is a stakeholder to the consultation. So the PSPO would be produced by Breckland Council, typically, as it has been done for other areas in Thetford, not least. So yeah, so Councillor, you might want to talk with the team here on progressing that if it falls entirely within the Breckland demise.
Thank you very much, members. And could I please thank Sarah Taylor, our Police and Crime Commissioner, for coming along today out of your busy schedule. I'm sure I speak on behalf of Commission members that we wish you well in your endeavour, and thank you for setting out some of the opportunities, challenges and honest horizon scanning about the things affecting us in Norfolk. I'm sure that you may get a few more bits of correspondence in your inbox from today, because we could have had obviously a much longer session with all the different strands that make up the role, which is of interest to all of us. So just like to thank you very much again and wish you well in all your endeavours on our behalf, and just remind everybody that to get in touch is right on the back there. There's a lot to read in here, then you'll realise how much is actually involved. It isn't just, as I know before this, but not everyone does, it isn't just police driving around in police cars, and it's the whole partnership approach, etc. So thank you once again, Sarah. Thank you. Thank you, members. We will now move on to item 9, quarter 4, which is the report of Councillor Alison Webb, which we're swapping round, is going ahead of Councillor Hewitt. So if you'd like to present your report, I know members will have seen the attachments that we've had from Alison, and just be mindful that Alison does have to leave us at 11:30 sharp. Thank you, Alison.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for swapping around, Harry. Okay, so this report looks at performance for quarter 4. In quarter 4, the majority of our key performance indicators are at or near target. There are a couple of specific areas I'd like to highlight first within the report. Firstly, our leisure participation over the last 12 months. In the last year, we've seen over 700,000 entries to our leisure sites. This is the highest we've ever seen in the post-COVID years. The reason I've highlighted this is that it shows our continued recovery in this area, which will increase further with a new 3G football pitch almost completed in Thetford and the project to enhance leisure facilities in Attleborough progressing well. The other area I want to highlight is standards complaints, which we've previously discussed here. I'm happy to say that we've now achieved 100% in Q3 and Q4 as a result of internal changes to the processes we've made to make it more efficient. Q4 did, however, see some challenging performance around days taken to process housing benefit and council tax and claims. This was discussed in length at our recent Cabinet meeting and has also been discussed at the ARP Joint Committee, which deals specifically with performance in this area. The team and I are obviously happy to take questions on this. However, the reasons behind this remain the same that we've already discussed at Cabinet. I will now hand over to Councillor Hewitt to cover projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. And as mentioned, Chair, this report was presented to Cabinet last month, and we're referring back to Q4 performance. We are very aware, certainly in the projects team, that we are already progressing with Q1 2005 projects moving forwards. But as at the end of Q4, as indicated in the report, there were 13 major projects, 3 of which had completed, 1 of which had been put on pause, but the majority were ongoing in terms of moving forwards. And I'm pleased to confirm the successful delivery of some of our key projects over that last quarter. We were able to formally close a project that saw us purchase 15 homes using funding from the Local Authority Housing Fund. The properties are being used to support households that require temporary accommodation and create a cost avoidance to this council of some £70,000 a year. We've also completed the Healthy Homes project, which has addressed issues of damp and mould in the private rental sector. The project saw us engaged with residents to help them understand their rights. As a result, we've seen a 35% increase in the number of damp and mould cases being reported. We also work with landlords to provide efficient and effective solutions to these and other related issues. Q4, Chair, saw us launch a new food waste service for local businesses in the light of new legislation, and I'm delighted to report that by close of Q4, we had already seen an uptake from 44 businesses, well above our planned target. And finally, since the time of putting this report together and reporting it to Cabinet and today, we have already received tender submissions in relation to the Attleborough Leisure project, and we'll be looking to appoint, in fact, very shortly, appoint a main contractor to take these steps moving forwards. Talks are also progressing towards a funding application with the new 3G pitch as part of that project. And as always, happy to take any questions that members of the Commission might have, but for now I will pass over to Phil to talk about finance.
Thank you, Paul.
Finance doesn't form part of this performance report, actually. No, you're okay. But what I would like to do is just nuance the 2 items that are in red on the performance for Q4. And as Alison has said, the Joint Committee does discuss, obviously, performance of whatever ARP is undertaking. And the next meeting is next week, but we had a pre-briefing session only yesterday to go through the papers for that particular meeting. And I just want to highlight the fact that these might look like they're red. In fact, they do look like they're red. But the average across the country is about 20 days to process benefit claims and to undertake other aspects of this particular target. The point I'm trying to make is that when we set a target of 6 or 7, it's an incredibly ambitious target. And it's one that's deliberately set because we know the importance to our customers of getting those claims settled quickly and efficiently so that they understand and have a better ability to manage their own circumstances. The fact that we are showing red is largely, as we've explained before, because the take-up from The universal credit regime has slowed the process down considerably, but processes that we're undertaking within ARP are enabling us now, as you can see, where it says down is good in terms of the direction of travel. We are bringing those targets down to meet our ambitious targets of 6 and 7. And it was confirmed, or it will be confirmed next week, that we're maintaining those ambitious targets and not relaxing them, even though they're showing as red. So I think it's to everyone's credit here in Breckland that we're able to provide those services to the customers in Breckland, particularly at the moment when cost pressures are so high for the residents of the district, that we're able to turn those claims round as quickly as we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions from members? First question, Gordon.
Thank you, and I appreciate I'm not a member. Could Councillor Cohen remind us what we were achieving in these same parameters from ARP when ARP was first put online, which I think was around about 2022 or 2002 or 3.
Yeah, it was a long time ago, Gordon. You and I can remember it because we were probably elected around about the time that it was set up. It was set up, ARP was set up as a partnership for those of us who sit around this room at the moment and we're unfamiliar with the origins. It was set up because here in Norfolk and Suffolk, district councils felt that there was a better way of doing things. So we set up ARP because our turnaround was particularly bad. And I think at some point we were probably one of the worst performing authorities in the country, delivering benefit claims anything up to 100 days after they were made. It was a really dire set of statistics. But our council colleagues at the time wanted to improve that for the very simple reason I've just explained, that it's the customers who suffer at the end of the day by not getting those claims managed and handled in an efficient manner that enables them to carry on with their lives and manage their own arrangements. So from starting at a very, very low point, where we were one of the worst performing councils in the country, we end up as a beacon authority. And the beacon authority that is setting the standard for other authorities around the country and working with government and the DWP to actually drive change and set standards, establish best practice, and mentor and teach other officers around the country how best to perform the duties that are so essential for those vulnerable residents that we all represent wherever we sit in England. So I'm very proud to be able to say that. This council has done remarkable things in the time I've been a councillor, and same length as Gordon. And this is one of the shining examples, to be frank. It really is. Thank you, Gordon.
Thank you. Any questions from members? Peter Wilkinson. Peter.
Thank you, Chairman. It's not a question really, it's a follow-up from what Gordon just said. For 10 years I've been a member, and ARP has been very, very helpful for members to work out with our ward work, which comes in from businesses and residents. And recently I've had contact with ARP to work out some business rates with a pub which would have probably closed if I didn't get that support. So they are doing a great job. Thank you.
And Chairman, if I may, we tend to focus, obviously, on residential properties and residents who struggle. But Councillor Wilkinson makes a very valid point. ARP does not just deal with residential matters. Business is absolutely vital. And our businesses across the district, generally speaking, are not large corporations with huge back offices and support networks. we have a huge number of small and medium enterprise businesses. And some of those don't have the knowledge and the understanding and the expertise themselves to navigate some of the challenges that the rate system actually provides. And I was only talking yesterday with the team at Thetford for ARP as to how we do support new businesses in identifying what grants are available, what support is available, and what discounts are available to them in order to either set up a business or maintain the business when it's going through difficult times. So ARP is not just a residential organisation dealing with council tax for the residents of Breckland. It also deals with the non-domestic rate element. And those businesses, many of whom don't appreciate that they fall under the threshold for business rates. And that really is a lifesaver for them. So thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Any further questions from members? If there aren't any, I've got just a couple of my own, if I may. On the page 2 of the performance report, looking down the fourth line there, percentage of HMO inspections completed within 3 weeks. The target there still says to be confirmed. That's one sort of question. And the other one is, we see the line above about housing multiple occupation, but also the prevention of homelessness. That's a downward trend there. And the other part of my question is, I'm assuming that the 15 properties that we've acquired, that will then feed into improving in that performance. I appreciate there's a time lag between purchase and those things, but it'd be nice to hear that there's going to be an update on that in future. That's my question. If you want to come back to me on either of those, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to come back on both those points. With regards to the missing HMO indicator, that's something that we're aware of at the moment. We're looking into that sort of reporting issue and looking to set that from Q4 moving forward. That's some work that myself and Ryan Pack are picking up on. And the other question with regards to housing indicators, yes, obviously those new properties will play a part in the targets moving forward, and we'll obviously include that in the Q1 report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there are any further questions from members, we've got a question from, got time for another about 5 minutes from Councillor Kybird. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. The percentage of licensable houses in multiple occupation, we've got 96.5%. So the 3.5%, are those the, roughly speaking, recognised as road landlords?
In the absence of Ryan Packer, I'm sure we'll be able to give you a very quick response on the spot. I'll take that question away and come back to you if that's okay, because I don't have that information to hand. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for that response. Any further questions? If there aren't any further questions, obviously you can contact the portfolio holders as usual. And I know some of you do also attend the cabinet and ask questions or raise them at full council. So thank you very much for your report, Alison, and your team. We're now going to move on to the next item, which is the Executive Members' Portfolio Brief. Councillor Paul Hewitt, over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. And Ruth, I think, or is it Mark? You've got it. Thank you, Ruth. We'll just bring up a presentation, Chair. And we will start with the cover slide, Ruth. And then I've always wanted to say next slide, please, but I will say that in just a second. Thank you very much. Is that what you want to show? Yep, perfect. Just go back one. Perfect. Thank you, Ruth. Superstar. Members, Chair, thank you very much indeed for this opportunity to present this portfolio to you. Often referred to as all the Ps, property, projects and procurement. I think the last time I presented to this commission was the best part of 1.5 to 2 years ago, and a lot has changed since then. But I'm delighted to be presenting to you today as part of my other role as executive member for Pride. Pride that celebrates, as part of our Breckland Cares campaign, diversity of thought, role, background and opportunity within this council, making sure that everyone feels welcomed and respected and valued, whatever their background, and particularly from an LGBTQ+ perspective. We raised a flag on Monday, and our work internally and externally is coinciding with some national initiatives that are taking place this month. But thank you, Ruth. If we move on to the next slide, please. I'd like to give a broad overview of the portfolio as a whole. There is a lot in it. Again, reflecting the PCC's comments earlier on, a lot in this portfolio is often misunderstood or not necessarily fully appreciated, and let's be blunt, on occasion it can be misrepresented. But I will endeavour to try and give an overview. I know that you have seen the overall deck in advance, so I won't repeat many of the things that I mentioned on the slides, but I will focus on some areas of this portfolio moving forwards. Also, reflecting the PCC's comments, if I kind of give an overall ambition for the portfolio, it's, I think, quoting Sarah, to do more with less. We know that funding is tight. We know that local authorities' funding numbers have been coming down increasingly over the last few years, partly reflecting the national picture and partly reflecting general pressures in terms of income. And I'm proud that this portfolio can do its part in helping to enhance the lives of our residents and our businesses, allowing them to thrive, even though not everything within this portfolio is going to be universally popular, nor as part of a popularity contest, because sometimes actually we need to think quite commercially rather than moving forwards. As I said, since I last presented to you, a lot has happened. Externally, we have got fundamentally a different outlook on the global economy, both in the US, throughout Europe. Nationally, we've got a different government, and locally, we've got some real pressures, both in terms of devolution and also in the form of the upcoming local government review. This has had some major changes on all of these areas, particularly in terms of our ambition to deliver a portfolio that can create value to this council, generate income to this council, which last year was just in excess of £3.3 million, broadly the second largest income stream that this council actually received. So for each area broadly, I'd like to have a look in terms of what are some of the major issues going on in assets and property, and what perhaps are some of the challenges moving forwards. And you'll probably see there was going to be a common theme in terms of the challenges moving forwards, represented by three letters LGR. So if we start, please, Ruth, with the next slide. Our property portfolio is a major part of the team's activity and work and focus. Some 90 odd million pounds worth of assets. The residential additions that I just referred to are in addition to that. But that 90 million odd portfolio split broadly 50% in terms of commercial assets, such as the investment that we made in Peerless Plastics last year, a major employer in Thetford, and we're proud to support both the employer and allow continuity of employment, as well as an investment return to this council. And the remaining 50% is broadly operational assets. They're things like streetlights, the offices that we occupy, our car park assets, and various other pieces of land that we hold. We hold those assets with one purpose, on behalf of our residents and our businesses, to allow us as a council to do what we choose to do and not just what we must do in statute overall. If we look in terms of the key activity, the major component of the overall property thrust over the course of the year was the development and establishment and approval by this council of our new property strategy, a strategy that has an absolute clear ambition, which is to optimise our property estate to ensure it's safe, sustainable, financially efficient, and fit for purpose. And we are continuing to deliver against a strategy that is both flexible and transparent, but operating with a framework under that clear vision. One of the main initial moves in that strategy was to set up an internal property working group, and we've had a number of meetings, and this great work continues. Another piece of work as part of that strategy was our first parish land review, Swanton Morley. We've been working with the council and with the member for Swanton Morley for a number of years about a number of pieces of land that we might be holding in part as a result of historical oddities, but also land that is perhaps best managed by a lower council rather than us. In other words, the council that actually operates within the location of that land. We are in the process of reviewing other parishes and will be in touch with them, the parish councils and the ward members, as this process moves on. But the team is small and we can only deal with one disposal in this way at a time. But it would be great if you, as an OSC, can be part of the support of this important work, and the team look forward to working with you as individual members within that. As was indicated by the Q4 performance process, we continue to acquire and manage residential properties. To date, we've bought 38 properties and leased a further 12. That's making 63 residential property units in total. This intervention has had a significant but positive impact on the council's budget in terms of reducing the cost of nightly paid accommodation, and we're also looking to improve the standard of accommodation in general as an exemplar to those other private landlords around, saying we can do this and we can ensure that both our residents feel safe and also are proud to live in some of our accommodations. We continue to manage such properties quite well with the churn rate of around 4 to 6 properties a week. In Thetford, we completed a feasibility report on a regeneration project very much in the centre and the heart of the town. And we look forward to actually sharing some of these regeneration plans with both you and with the wider public at some point in the near future. But on the site of the old Pine Close Community Centre, we're also progressing with an innovative modular housing scheme to help reduce our temporary accommodation costs further still. We're currently working through a business case in terms of leasing certain units in order to provide a medium, if not a long-term solution to the acute housing issues that we are all experiencing as a district moving forwards. Thank you, Ruth. Move on. We can't really talk about property without looking at one of our most major and significant challenging disposals from our property portfolio over the course of the year. This hasn't necessarily been popular. It's certainly been quite exciting to read the keyboard warriors jumping up and around it. But we can finally announce that Barnum Broom, as was reported elsewhere, was sold in March this year. And it was sold not for the massive loss that so many people, I suspect, wanted it to have been sold at, but actually at a profit. The sale was made to the owners of the business who had previously leased the asset from us. We purchased the asset in 7 million and we sold in 2006, and we sold it for just under 7 million, 6.9 million, some 19 years later. I've had people shouting at me saying, why didn't you sell it at a profit? And the answer was, this asset was never held for profit. This asset was held to generate income because that is what this council needs in order to provide the services that we require. It was in effect an annuity asset where we got our money back as opposed to the capital was eroded. And over the life of the asset, that asset produced some £6.8 million to this council to provide the services that we so need to provide for the residents who so need it. I've always said that Breckland is an authority with a commercial head, but with a community heart. And with rent brought in by this asset in particular, as well as other assets, it enables us to go above and beyond what we would ordinarily just statutorily be required to do on behalf of our residents and our communities. The money generated through the sale hasn't only just been used to purchase other temporary housing, but it has been matched funded. In other words, the capital receipt we could use to match fund with other grant monies in order to enhance new build opportunities moving forwards. Thank you, Ruth. Next slide. A little bit like Barn and Broom, we can't not talk about assets and assets without talking about our car parks. We made it very clear, following agreement to move towards a charging model the best part of a year and a bit ago, that we could no longer continue to make decisions where, on the one hand, our car parks are costing £450,000 per year, and at the same time, we cannot help vulnerable residents who need, in many instances, some of that money that we're diverting elsewhere from our general funding mix. Only following our agreement to move towards a charging model, because we had to do it in that order, we then proceeded to run a detailed and open consultation process to try to work out with each town how and why car park assets can best be managed at a local level on a cost recovery basis moving forwards. That feedback was very detailed. In many instances, it was quite blunt, but in the same instances, it was a far more positive experience from both the council and also, I think, from many of the respondents' perspective than what we initially thought it might be. However, LGR has effectively stopped the whole reason for our car park charging model. The whole reason for our car park charging model, if approved by this council, was to maintain, support and protect the medium-term budget for this council moving forwards. If this council ceases to exist, by definition, as a result of LGR, the purpose for which the whole car park consultation process would take place will also cease to exist. So we have put the car park process in terms of a charging framework on hold. Instead, we are now engaging with our towns. The challenge that we have is any new super council that is looking at assets within the middle of the district will ask a fundamental question, which is, why are other areas around charging for car parking, whereas this small group of a series of car parks in the middle of Norfolk is not? And so we have gone to our towns to say, if you want to take ownership and control of the car parks within your areas, we can, and actually we would recommend that you do so, but the window is tight. There is a very short time frame before the legal impacts of the LGR actually start beginning to bite. Can we give everything away? No, we can't. We have an obligation to future taxpayers, in whichever council they are, to ensure that the assets within this region actually belong to them. Can we lease those assets? Yes, we can. Can we lease them at a peppercorn rent? Yes, we can. Does the leasehold interest give the towns the control and ownership rights that they might want? No, it doesn't. But at the same time, it does allow a near freehold experience from a 25-year lease moving forwards. Now, the terms of the lease, the negotiated lease terms, all of the conversations are currently in motion, and there is a long way still to go. But we believe that we have a window of opportunity as a district to provide our towns with the assets that they want, but not at a prohibitive cost to them, in order for towns to dictate what towns do with car park assets within their towns. Thank you, Ruth. Next one, please. Breckland Bridge. Breckland Bridge. Chair, members. Breckland Bridge was set up with a very specific purpose. It was designed and structured to create economic and social benefits for our residents and our taxpayers through the development and building of housing and other land-related projects where the private sector alone was either unable or unwilling to make that commitment. In that respect, Breckland Bridge has worked very well over the last few years. We were instrumental in the £8 million investment in Riverside that is still generating some 381,000 yield per year. We were instrumental in building in Attleborough, in Milam, and also in disposing of certain small sites to various towns and parishes, all of which have created revenue to our taxpayers and benefited local communities by providing much needed houses where otherwise they simply would not exist. But to be a house builder, and Breckland Bridge as a partnership between Land Group and us as a council, a true partnership, a joint venture, we do not control Bridge, neither do Land Group. It is a specific joint venture partnership structured in that way to ensure that no party has overall control. In order to build, we need really three major conditions. One is we need a credible and sustainable pipeline of sites to build on in the medium term. Two is that we need a churn of property projects which will feed into that pipeline. And three, we need certainty and confidence to plan for the future in a stable and a manageable way. Now, that's not true just of Breckland Bridge, it's true of any house builder, but it becomes more acute to us as a council with a joint venture in Breckland Bridge. One is because we are smaller, but two is in part with your guidance as a commission in the past. We don't just want to build houses, we want to build good houses. We want to build sustainable houses. We want to be an exemplar as builders to actually ensure that what we are building is what a community wants, including low cost and affordable houses as part of that. And the current environment simply does not permit that. So we have decided temporarily to pause all activity within Breckland Bridge. We have done that because it is the right thing to do now. A new super council perhaps might take control, and the projects currently under existence within Breckland Bridge might be able to continue. But at the moment, as indicated by the PCC, uncertainty regarding the future, uncertainty regarding funding, simply makes the current bridge model as it currently stands a challenging model to execute. Having said that, we will continue with Colkirk. We have stated that Colkirk is an important development for the local community, and it is also an exemplar because we will continue to build in Colkirk, ensuring that affordable housing are part of our build process. We will need to value engineer in terms of the level and the quality of housing that's there, but we want to deliver where others cannot. We believe it's important as a council to say that we will continue to build despite the economic and financial services, because house building is important for our residents and important for our taxpayers in terms of ensuring that the bridge model remains viable. As part of that process, we are also looking to dispose some of our sites without actually building onto completion. So Banham, with its planning permission, will be put up for sale. We continue also to look at other sites within our current pipeline to determine whether we are better off disposing them as is, or whether actually we're better just to hold on to them should financial and economic conditions change at some point in the future. So, Chair, as part of the overall property area, I was recently asked to take part in one of our Breckcast podcasts and was asked the question, why do we actually invest in property within the district? And I thought in part just to make a change of environment that you might want to listen to a little bit of the podcast as was actually delivered at the time.
when you're out and about in the district, shopping on a Saturday or Sunday, if a resident were to come up to you in the high street and say, why is my council acting like a landlord? What would your quick, succinct answer be?
And I think my quick answer would be because you want us to. But not working as a landlord. You want us to operate as a responsible landlord. As a responsible landlord, we actually can provide the facilities, the buildings where employment takes place. That's beneficial to businesses and residents in the district. As a responsible landlord, we can invest in our communities. That is a benefit for our residents moving forward. And most importantly, as a responsible landlord, we can generate the yield that we need in order to provide the income that we want, to provide the services to our businesses and residents to allow them to thrive. That's why we do it. And that's why I think it's the right thing to do. And that's why I think it's something that we should continue to do. Because ultimately, in order for us to deliver our vision for Breckland, we want to make sure that we've got the certainty and the income to deliver that vision and that strategy moving forwards.
When you're out and about in the district.
Yeah, stop it. I only want to hear it once. I hate hearing myself, I really do. No, thank you very much indeed, Ruth. If we move back now, Chair, with your permission, just to close off the rest of this presentation, and we'll move back in terms of procurement and contracts. Thank you, Ruth. Procurement and contracts remain a major challenge and an opportunity for this council moving forwards. The legislative kind of hand grenade that constitutes the Procurement Act 1923, I still regard as the act that keeps on giving. There were a lot of initial delays with secondary legislation, a very tight deadline in applying the legislation, a focus on transparency and small businesses, which ultimately was targeted more towards government departments rather than local councils, have all caused resource and process uncertainty. But in the main, these are now fully embedded within the team moving forwards. There are a number of large procurements underway in the team, and we provide those services, not just for us, but for a small handful of councils around us. We heard earlier on from Councillor Webb about the work that's taken place in Attleborough Leisure. The principal contractor procurement process is now at the bid evaluation stage, and the current timeline should deliver a good result on the successful bidder by the end of this month. We've then got a period of value engineering, cost cutting to you and I, that will enable the contract cost to meet formal contract award terms and at the same time hopefully ensure that this contract is delivered on time in full as planned. We've recently awarded a new contract for our dog warden and our kennelling services. We've renewed the contract for our garden waste disposal suppliers. A recent spend analysis has recently been completed and is proving to be instrumental in forming a procurement strategy and understanding the compliance challenges within those areas. A methodology has been agreed, and this will better enable us to have financial and contractual visibility as required under the PA 2023 within all of the service areas that we provide, and can cascade information across the whole organisation. Yeah. Contract procedure rules and enhanced transparency requirements under the Procurement Act continue to make what I call a sensible procurement service, which is, if best value appears itself, we should undertake it, quite difficult to maintain. But at the same time, our officers are being thoroughly changed. They're aware of the recent changes. Our standard terms, actually, in terms of process terms within this council, will shortly be updated to reflect the new Procurement Act requirements. And new documents and guidance are being created almost as we speak to support every level of spend across this council with the aim of making everything accessible through the internet by the end of the year. And that will include a new initiative, which is procurement on a page, where we will, and everyone will be able to see headline information on all key areas of activity for this council, progress with key projects, quarterly spend analysis, local spend, contracts approaching expiry, service area challenges, and so on. So for the procurement team, it's a small team, but they continue to excel moving forwards. Next slide, please, Ruth. If the procurement team is small, the legal team is smaller still, but still work across a number of important and complex work streams, including contentious planning applications, which typically are open-ended and require a deft handling of individuals involved in that negotiation, as well as clarity and precision in terms of applying legal principles. We've been involved in prosecution cases relating to health and safety and coroner's inquest hearings. Current activity in this area is also including reviewing of corporate complaints processes, again, as Alison raised earlier on, and assisting with other local authorities within their legal works. In terms of challenges, there remain, as always remain, budget pressures requiring careful management, and the teams have to work hard to keep up with workloads. No matter how hard we try, we are in a litigious society, where the temptation always is to blame somebody else in order to get a payout, and that takes a continuing pressure and places a continuing pressure on us with the resources that we have available in terms of the team moving forwards. But in regards to the future, we are looking to reduce external spend further and create income through the recent recruitment of a new planning lawyer. And I'm delighted to say that she has already exceeded expectations in this respect. Work is also ongoing to improve the tracking, the monitoring, and the recording of cases to help us better understand and to forecast spend and resources. By definition, legal challenges can never be predicted, but they can be managed and planned for to the best of our ability. And ultimately, our work in this area is going to help us to ensure the best value possible. And finally, Chair, members, Ruth, if we just look now to corporate projects. As updated in my Q4 report just recently, the Corporate Project Service has now been established and resourced for 2 years. We spoke to you as a commission 2 years ago to say that actually we needed 2 years to be clear in terms of whether or not the Corporate Project Services will be able to stand on its own 2 feet and begin the process of changing not just the process within this council, but the mindset of every employee in this council to think in a project-orientated, agile way. And I'm delighted that that process is more than well underway. During the time over the last 2 years, there's been a noticeable increase in the number of high-priority projects being delivered across the council that the team have either directly delivered or actively supported. This included, as mentioned just a few minutes ago, housing acquisitions to support with the challenges we face in the housing sector, energy efficiency projects such as the installation of solar panels and the installation of EV chargers across the district. As a result, and a direct result of this project delivery approach, there have been service improvements made across planning, enforcement, and environmental services through new ways of working and software upgrades. The current programme of projects includes improvements to Attleborough Leisure and simpler recycling initiatives, as indicated elsewhere. To ensure that projects across the council are delivered efficiently and with the best use of skills and resources, a new project management framework has also been created. This is not a tick box, this is an attitudinal framework that gets everyone within this council to think and behave like a project manager with outcomes in mind, ensuring that actually we can be most efficient and effective in what we do, and to ensure that our projects are delivered on time and on budget. But, and there is always a but, in the light of local government reorganisation, we are now reprioritising much of the project initiatives, some of which were scheduled to have long-term benefits for this council moving forward, that can no longer and will no longer be realised. We are looking to reprioritise project delivery to ensure that we deliver the projects that have the biggest lasting impact, not necessarily for Breckland, but for our residents who will remain even when Breckland has long disappeared. This changing landscape provides us actually with a significant challenge in relation to funding and resourcing. We will know as members within this place that actually LGR does not come necessarily with the bill required to fund and cost the changes necessary to deliver in it. We have to work within the constraints that we have, and we have to work within our ability to raise and generate the money that we need to do that. And we have to work collaboratively, both in terms of officers and, can I suggest, also as members across this place. We need to ensure that whatever happens to Breckland moving forwards, our residents and our businesses that we represent now will continue to have the representation and the resources that they need. Market conditions are always changing. Fluctuations around inflation makes it difficult to price and accurately forecast project costs, and this can impact, as we have seen elsewhere and as I see in my work, the cost of rebuild, cost materials and labour. But I'm convinced that actually we've got the right project team in place to deliver projects in the right way. Some of our ambitious work to regenerate, for instance, the riverside areas in Thetford, with the vision of enhancing our district for generations to come, will without doubt last beyond what we can achieve as councillors within Breckland Council and the project team can deliver in future. But I'm optimistic, Chair. And that's the end of my report. I'm happy to take any questions, and I've got the rest of the team with me to answer any questions that members might have.
Thank you very much, Paul. Open to members. The first hand I've seen up is Councillor David Blackburn. David.
Okay, going back to Barn and Broom, and I'm happy to have a written answer on this one. According to the Bank of England inflation calculator, the 7 million spent on purchase in 06 would have been in excess of 11 million. So it was sold, in theory, at a loss. Could you email me the actual costs of disposal, any legal fees, anything like that, including the costs of hiding this from public scrutiny, and I gather there's quite a few thousand involved there, and any other costs incurred over the last X number of years since 2006. So you can see what the running cost of the project was, the actual cost, and any losses that may have been made over that period. I'm happy, there's a lot of detail there, so happy to have that emailed at some time in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and I will do that. I will, if I may, just respond on a couple of points that you raised. And again, just for clarity, you talked about the costs involved in protecting the confidentiality of a legal agreement where we had signed a legal agreement between buyer and seller that was a confidentiality clause within it. And I will absolutely defend the cost of maintaining that legal confidentiality because we had to. The request was made under a Freedom of Information request, as you're probably well aware, which, with the greatest respect, was probably politically motivated, not from you, but from other people who are in this place. And we were proved subsequently correct to defend ourselves against that FOI request because a subsequent inspector actually ruled that we were right to do so. So I have no qualms about protecting commercial confidentiality because, like any landlord, every one of our land contracts is commercially confidential with the tenant that we use. But I will give you all of the information. Actually, we have made it available elsewhere under an FOI request, so I will forward that on to you. All of the costs of holding, managing and maintaining. And disposal. And just one final thing, I would always venture caution, and I'm sure this wasn't intentional, with making investment decisions based on hindsight. And it's very easy just to say we could have done X or we could have done Y. We could have invested in gold and we would be sitting on £35 million return now. We could have invested in Apple shares and we would be sitting on 500 million of assets now. We didn't because we can't. What we did do is make an investment decision based on the time, and that investment decision did generate, unlike RPI, which just shows the capital appreciation of an asset rather than the cash that it generated £6.8 million worth of cash over the period of ownership. So like a bond, where we buy an asset for yield rather than capital growth, we use the yield, and that's what made it successful. But I've got all the cash flows. I will forward everything on to you. More than happy then to have a further conversation.
Thank you. Robert Kyburn. Robert.
Thank you, Chairman. Just looking at the Barnum Broom figures, the rental received represents a return of 5.1% per annum, calculated on a simple basis, and from for 14 of those 17 years, bank rate was 0.75% or less. So you're 4% ahead of the curve, I'd say.
And yes, the decision actually to dispose of Barnum Broom, I mean, one of the challenges with property is you can't sell a bit of it. You've got to sell all of it. You've got to sell none of it. Certainly for the period from about 2008-9 to 2020 almost, base rates in the UK were virtually nil. And we did generate a yield on top of base rates and a significant yield on top of double or AAA rated bonds, which are the only other assets that we are allowed to invest in as a district council outside of land. I'd love to invest in shares, and we could have done so much better. I would love to invest in other things as well. But you are right, as interest rates, as inflation spiked, as COVID and subsequently Ukraine happened, we always need to reassess an investment strategy. Is it worth keeping hold of an asset, or is it worth disposing of it?
So, thank you. I think I may miss Councillor Wickerson off. Councillor Wickerson, David.
I'm used to that.
My apologies.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I would like to personally congratulate the property team, and I often wonder where we would be without what we have done with our assets and so on and so forth. Yes, there have been some good points and maybe one or two bad points, but overall, where would Breckland Council be without our property team? One question is specific on one of your slides, Paul, because I am quite often quizzed by residents of the ward that I represent about commercial property availability. And you mentioned that Swaffham was listed there as in the future. Do we have any concept of what the future time frame might be? If somebody comes up to me and asks about units on the Ecotech site, for example, when those units might possibly be available, that would be quite useful. Thank you.
If I may, Councillor, I'll defer to one of my team to answer that second point, but if I can just come back on the first point. I'm fortunate, my work takes me to some of the largest property and asset managers in the world. So I deal with clients who running asset and property portfolios of up to €1 trillion, and in some instances, nearly $10 trillion overseas. These are specialist organisations with hundreds and hundreds of people operating within them. I'm so proud of the team that we have here, which can be counted on one hand, and I don't want to be disrespectful to anyone who's kind of helping on that, who constantly punch above their weight with one focus, which is, can we deliver something more on behalf of our residents that actually can allow them to thrive? And I'm so, so pleased with the team, with limited resources, with limited actually budget. And so from that perspective, I will pass on my thanks, which I do frequently in terms of what a good job they're doing. But I will pass on actually to Ralph, or Zoe, pardon me, to answer.
Morning, thank you for the question. Yes, we purchased a piece of land off the Turbine Way road on that estate a few years back now to make sure that that piece of land came forward for development, because it is an employment piece of land and we wanted to make sure that that happened. We've had a few bumps in the road in terms of bringing a scheme forward, and we've looked at what alternatives it could be used for, but we have now sort of got the green light to move forward with that. So we are now about to prepare a planning application to go in, and it will be purely for commercial property.
and they're likely to be sort of small startup units to support those businesses, you know, starting up and wanting to secure property in Swaffham. As you say, the properties in Swaffham that we currently own and have owned for many years do very well. So we're hoping that we can do exactly the same on the new site in Turbine Way.
Thank you, Zoe. And I would say that there does appear to be demand, which is encouraging. So to continue that development of that particular site, thank you.
Thank you. Members and non-members, any further questions of Paul and his team? I've got one question, if I might, Paul, is you mentioned the limited window that's coming up, or corridor of uncertainties, which we've heard about earlier in terms of LGR. Is there a final sort of published legal deadline in terms of when you can and can't say, right, you can't take decisions on land transfers at this point? Whilst we might have had a steer, there isn't anything actually published as yet. That's my question. Thank you.
And again, I might pass on to somebody else on the team, but for now, the answer is no. This is politics. This is like the Procurement Act. We get told this is going to happen. We have no secondary legislation, and we're told actually it needs to be implemented, so on. We are being cautious. The conversations that we are having, and there are quite open conversations with many of our towns, are going into a lot of detail in terms of ambition and future purpose, and we've held a number of them. Where we have an ambition of making sure that assets move to towns, the one thing we don't know is what is the cut-off date, but we know it is coming, and it will probably happen this year rather than in 5 years' time. And we don't want to put any towns under any pressure to react, but what there is an immovable deadline, which when it's passed, it will be passed. And at that point, we will just say we tried. We will leave land assets as they are for a super council to take over and do what they wish to do moving forwards.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. If there aren't any more questions at the moment, I'd like to thank you very much for your team for presenting today. I think you're due back around December again, by the time which things will have moved on a bit. I'm sure obviously members have got the opportunity to contact you and the team of individual queries, and I'm sure some areas will have moved on, and we may want that members may wish to focus on a few areas which I'm sure we'll let you know about in advance in broad detail. So thank you very much, Paul.
Chair, can I just echo that? One of the challenges, things are moving quickly. I would rather that myself or the team, if there is a question, please ask. We have nothing to hide. The frustration is that there's a question and somebody somewhere says, oh, it must be that, and then that gets picked up by somebody else, and all of a sudden we're thinking, actually, that wasn't true at all, but nobody actually talked to us. So delighted. Ralph, Zoe, the rest of the wider team, myself, more than happy to take any questions from commission members or wider members or members of the public.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll bear that in mind, along with also the role of the Commission, which is to scrutinise and have constructive challenge as well as asking questions, because this isn't like PMQs, you know, with planted questions, Paul. Thank you very much. We've now moved on to, I think, item 10, which is the outside body feedback. And we've got a report, I think, from Councillor Robert Kybird. Thank you, Robert. And then David Wilkinson and then Peter Wilkinson. Robert.
Thank you, Chairman. From the Breckland Area Museums Committee, I'm pleased to announce that Ancient has received a certificate for the £5,000 capital funding that Breckland awarded through the Rural Prosperity Fund. That was used for new display cases in conjunction with the centenary commemorations from the Dulip Singh family. And upcoming events, this Sunday is Open Farm Day at Gresson Hall, which is free entry, but there will be a parking charge. Last year that attracted 5,000 visitors, which is about capacity for the site. The following weekend, which is Father's Day, there will be free entry there for fathers. And then on the 12th and the 13th of July is the Festival of Thetford and the Punjab. Again, Breckland have provided £5,000 in support of that two-day weekend, and the main event is known as a Mela, which is from 1 p.m. on Sunday the 13th in the Grammar School grounds. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. David.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick reminder to members present and all members, basically, with regards to the Nicholas Hammond Trust, which, as you know, I chair, and remind people that we are able to give grants not only to individuals who live in Breckland and who are under the age of 21, but we can also support, and I've just got a couple of examples here, organisations that work with young people in Breckland. We recently, for example, gave a grant to the young carers at Watton, which is part of the Benjamin Foundation, for the great work that they do. We've also given funding grants to the youth sections of Swaffham Rugby Club, Swaffham Football Club, Thetford Football Club, etc., etc. Individually, we are now seeing a lot of individual grants from students because of the fact that Swaffham no longer, unfortunately, has a sixth form, for transport costs to get them to Dereham, Kings Lynn, or Norwich even, for their further education, which is a very sad comment, really, in the sense that we have, well, I say we don't have to do it, we're a charity, but we get lots of applications in those respects. So if you have any contacts with organisations that fit under that criteria, we also, for example, help people through the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme. Please go to our website if it's an individual application. We now have our application form on our website electronically, which is brilliant. If there's an organisation which our funding could help, then please do email me personally, and I will put that forward, because the application form on the website is purely for individual applications, if that makes sense. So we are, quote unquote, open for business. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. I do note there's also a scheme coming out from the County Council, which I think is giving up to about £5,000 per county councillor. So there are other areas to sort of tap into, which I think you can look out for. So thank you for that. Peter Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Breckland Yab, who I represent here in Breckland Council. All the Yabs came together from across Norfolk last month here in Dereham, celebrating the good work that is carried out by the Yabs and showcasing the projects with some amazing results for young people who've taken part in those. The QEH, you've probably heard in the press, is now become one of the new hospital trusts alongside Norwich and Norfolk and James Pageant, with a new CEO in place, and she is Professor Leslie Dwyer. Each hospital will be a part of the group board with a single set of executives and non-executive directors, with each hospital appointing a new managing director to manage the day-to-day running of their single hospital. And we've been holding support days for dementia people, families and their carers. We all came together at QEH at the beginning of last month with great success, and organisations there offering advice to families and their carers. And I also went and represented Breckland at the one of the care homes in Downham Market when we held a Dementia Day last week. Just a note, if you might not have heard, that the Norfolk Health Overview and Scrutiny Commission has been renamed after a full council meeting at Norfolk County Council. The commission now is going to be called Health Overview Select Committee, and the committee will still have the same remit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you. If there aren't any more outside body requests, I'd just like to also remind members that There are other representative outside bodies, quite a large number of them, but if members want to provide a short written update to have us published with the agenda, because some of those may not have the prominence or be reported elsewhere. But I thank our 3 usual diligent members who always report at every meeting to Scrutiny on their outside work, valuable work. Thank you very much. Item 11, members, is Scrutiny call-in items. I haven't received any requests for a call-in. Thank you. Item 12, have members got any referral call for action by the Commission? Haven't had any, thank you. The work programme, we've attached the work programme, and obviously we need to look at any additions, deletions or amendments, and we're taking the lead on those. And obviously we've noted that we still have a number of items which we've had mentioned in the past by Councillor Turner and others to progress around EV charging and also bottles, etc., which will try and progress that. In terms of the future meeting, we next have our meeting next is in September, and we're revisiting the housing part of Councillor Suggett's portfolio. I'm asking that housing providers also attend, and I'll be submitting a short list of key performance suggested indicators so that we can ask those providers a range of issues to report back on, so we're comparing like with like and not comparing apples with pears, so we can do it, we can contrast their performance. And I'm checking up that the invitations have gone out, and that will be in September. But I will be sending this list round to members to see if they're happy with the list in the first place and they wish to add or amend it too. And if any members now have any items for future work programme, please speak now, or you can still contact me as the chair after the meeting if there's anything pressing. But we've got the work programme lined up from September onwards. Thank you. Invite members to note that the arrangements for the next meeting will be the 4th of September at 10 o'clock in the Anglia Room here. We have no scheduled meeting in July or August due to the sort of summer recess. So may I take this opportunity to wish members well in any summer we may have. And thank you for coming along. I'm sure we have a wonderful summer. Thank you. I'll close the meeting.